Scary telling.
It was Easter Sunday, and we had just finished a lovely brunch. We settled in to watch Peter Rabbit, but my unease grew as I noticed my husband sneaking out to the garage. When he returned with a small kennel, my heart sank. I knew it was going to be another bunny for our son. I gave him a scowl and whispered, "It better not be what I think it is." But my husband just whispered back, "Relax," with a smile on his face. He presented the bunny to our son, and my heart broke as I saw the excitement on his face. This was the third year in a row that my husband had given our son a bunny for Easter. And the previous 2 years, the bunnies had ended up dead. I knew my husband loved this family tradition from his own childhood, but I couldn't bear to see another innocent animal suffer. I kept a close eye on the bunny, watching as my son played with him and named him Bunnicula. I tried to convince myself that maybe this bunny would be different, maybe my husband wouldn't let anything happen to him. But deep down, I knew the truth. My husband had a dark side, and he was obsessed with the idea of his son becoming a real man. As the day wore on, my anxiety grew. I couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was going to happen. And as we prepared to go to bed that night, I made a decision. I was going to keep a watchful eye on that bunny, no matter what it took. After everyone was asleep, I snuck into my son's room and hid in his closet. I felt ridiculous, like I was in some kind of horror movie, but I couldn't let anything happen to that bunny. I watched as my son carefully took the bunny out of his kennel and petted him gently. He was so gentle and loving with the bunny, and I felt a glimmer of hope that maybe he was different from his father. But then the door swung open, and my husband barged in. My heart raced as I watched him grab the bunny and start squeezing it until it squealed. My son begged him to stop, but my husband just threatened to harm him if he didn't kill the bunny quickly. Tears streaming down his face, my son took the bunny by the neck and slammed it against the wall, killing it instantly. I felt sick to my stomach as I watched him sob in agony. My husband praised him for getting better at killing, promising that next year he wouldn't even cry. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. My son was turning into a monster, just like his father. I knew I had to do something, but I didn't know what. I couldn't leave my son alone with his father, but I couldn't stay with him either. The only thing I knew for sure was that I had to keep Bunnicula safe, no matter what. The memory of my son killing the bunny haunted me for days. I couldn't shake the image of him holding the bunny by the neck and slamming it against the wall. And the worst part was, my husband seemed proud of him. I knew I had to keep a closer eye on my son and Bunnicula. I couldn't let anything happen to that bunny. So, that night, I snuck into my son's room again and hid in the closet. I felt ridiculous, but I couldn't take any chances. As I watched my son carefully take Bunnicula out of his kennel and pet him gently, my heart filled with warmth. Maybe my son wasn't a monster after all. Maybe he was just caught up in his father's twisted game. But then the door swung open, and my husband barged in. I held my breath, praying that he wouldn't hurt my son or the bunny. But my fears were confirmed when he grabbed the bunny and started squeezing it until it squealed. My son begged him to stop, but my husband just threatened to harm him if he didn't kill the bunny quickly. My heart raced as I watched my son take the bunny by the neck and slam it against the wall, killing it instantly. I felt sick to my stomach as I watched my son sob in agony. I knew I had to intervene, but I didn't know how. I couldn't risk my husband turning his rage on me or my son. As my husband left the room, I waited a few minutes before coming out of the closet. I had to make sure he was gone before I comforted my son. I held him tight as he cried, trying to make sense of what had just happened. I knew I had to confront my husband about what he was doing to our son, but I also knew that he wouldn't listen to reason. He was too caught up in his twisted game of masculinity and violence. The next day, I made a decision. I was going to leave my husband and take my son with me. It was the only way to keep him safe from the cycle of abuse and violence that had taken over our lives. But I had to be careful. I knew my husband wouldn't let us leave without a fight. As I packed our bags and prepared to flee, my heart raced with fear. I knew that this was the only chance we had to escape, but I also knew that we were in danger. I prayed that we would make it out alive. As we prepared to leave, I felt a sense of dread wash over me. I knew that my husband wouldn't let us leave without a fight. I had to be careful, and I had to be quick. I packed our bags and made sure that Bunnicula was safe and secure. My son was scared, but he knew that we had to leave. He had seen the darkness in his father's eyes, and he knew that we couldn't stay with him any longer. As we crept towards the front door, I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. I knew that any moment, my husband could come bursting in, ready to stop us from leaving. But we made it out the door without incident. We jumped in the car and sped away, leaving our old life behind. As we drove, my son and I talked about what we would do next. We would start a new life, far away from the darkness and the violence of our past. We would find a new home, a new community, and a new family. But as we drove, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I could feel eyes on us, watching our every move. I knew that my husband was following us, and I knew that we were in danger. As we drove down a deserted stretch of road, my fears were confirmed. My husband's car pulled up beside us, and he began to swerve, trying to run us off the road. I slammed on the brakes and tried to swerve out of his way, but it was too late. His car crashed into ours, sending us spinning out of control. When we finally came to a stop, I could feel the blood trickling down my face. My son was screaming, and I could see that his arm was broken. I knew that we had to get out of there before my husband came back for us. With all the strength I had left, I dragged my son out of the car and into the nearby woods. We ran as fast as we could, trying to put as much distance between us and my husband as possible. But as we ran, I could feel my strength slipping away. The pain in my head was unbearable, and I knew that I was losing a lot of blood. I had to keep going, for my son's sake. Finally, we stumbled upon a small cabin in the woods. It was abandoned, but it would provide us with shelter and safety. We huddled together, trying to stay warm and dry as the rain poured down outside. I knew that we couldn't stay there forever, but it was the best we could do for now. I had to come up with a plan to keep us safe, to keep us hidden from my husband. But as I sat there, nursing my wounds and trying to keep my son calm, I realized that there was no hiding from the darkness that had taken over our lives. We were caught up in a cycle of violence and abuse, and it seemed like there was no way out. As we huddled together in the abandoned cabin, I knew that we were in the eye of the storm. My husband was out there, searching for us, and I knew that we couldn't stay hidden forever. But for now, we were safe. My son and I sat together, trying to stay warm and dry as the rain poured down outside. I checked on his broken arm, doing my best to set it and wrap it with the supplies we had in our bags. I knew that we couldn't stay in the cabin forever. We needed to find a way to get help, to get out of this cycle of violence and abuse. But I also knew that we couldn't leave the safety of the cabin without a plan. As the storm raged outside, I began to formulate a plan. We would wait until the storm passed, then we would make our way to the nearest town. I would try to find a phone and call for help, while my son stayed hidden and safe. But as the night wore on, my fears grew. I could feel my strength slipping away, and I knew that I was losing a lot of blood from the wound on my head. I knew that I had to keep going, for my son's sake, but I didn't know how much longer I could hold on. Finally, as the first light of dawn began to filter through the trees, the storm began to subside. I knew that this was our chance. We packed our bags and prepared to leave the safety of the cabin. As we stepped outside, I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. I knew that we were still in danger, but I also knew that we had to keep moving forward. We set out on foot, making our way towards the nearest town. As we walked, I could feel the eyes of the forest on us. I knew that my husband was out there, somewhere, searching for us. But I also knew that we had to keep moving forward. After what felt like hours of walking, we finally made it to the nearest town. I found a phone and called for help, tears streaming down my face as I told the operator what had happened. Within minutes, we were surrounded by police and medical personnel. My son was taken to the hospital for treatment, and I was rushed into surgery for the wound on my head. As I lay in the hospital bed, recovering from surgery, I knew that our lives would never be the same. We had been through a traumatic ordeal, and I knew that it would take time for us to heal. But I also knew that we were survivors. We had made it through the storm, and we were stronger for it. We would find a way to heal, to move on, and to build a new life for ourselves, far away from the darkness and violence of our past. After our harrowing escape from my husband's violence, my son and I were in a daze. We had been through so much, and we had lost so much. But we were survivors, and we were determined to rebuild our lives. With the help of social services, we found a new home in a quiet, peaceful neighborhood. It was a small, cozy house, but it was ours. We filled it with love, laughter, and new memories. My son was still healing from the trauma he had experienced, but he was doing better every day. We talked about what had happened, and I reassured him that he was not to blame for what his father had done. As we settled into our new life, I began to heal as well. I went to therapy, talking about the trauma I had experienced and the pain that had been inflicted on our family. I began to see that there was hope for our future, and that we could build a new life for ourselves, free from violence and abuse. One day, while we were out for a walk, my son spotted a tiny, white rabbit in a pet store window. He looked up at me, his eyes wide with wonder. "Can we get him, Mom? Can we bring him home?" At first, I hesitated. The memory of the bunnies my husband had given my son haunted me. But then I looked into my son's eyes, and I saw hope and joy. I knew that we had been through too much to let fear hold us back. So, we brought the bunny home, and my son named him Snowball. We watched as Snowball hopped around our living room, and I felt a sense of peace wash over me. We were starting a new life, and this time, we were in control. As the years passed, my son and I healed together. We built a new life for ourselves, one filled with love, laughter, and hope. We never forgot the pain and trauma of our past, but we used it as fuel to rebuild our lives and create a new future for ourselves. Looking back on our journey, I realized that we were never truly alone. We had the support of our friends, family, and community. We had each other, and we had the courage to start anew. And as Snowball hopped around our living room, I felt a sense of gratitude for the second chance we had been given. We were survivors, and we had come out on the other side, stronger and more resilient than ever before.